got patrol.
Hello, SCC sports fans. Sports Producer David Schuyler joining you for a very special program. We are recapping the 2019-2020 sports season, and I am joined by two of our announcers to help me do that, Geoff Discher and Alex Westad. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. How are we doing?
Decently.
Excellent. Well, that's better than a lot of other responses, so I like the enthusiasm, Geoff. The reason being that we felt the need to bring you this program is because 2019-2020 was certainly a crazy year on so many levels from a sports perspective and from the standpoint of not being able to have sports in the spring. So we are going to get into everything. We have highlights, we have stats, we have graphics, a little bit of everything coming at you. So let's get right into it, starting with the fall season and kicking things off with girls soccer. Geoff, take it away.
Well, Mahtomedi and Orono met in the state championship game for the third consecutive year. So if you wanted to say it this way, it was the same song, different verse. Mahtomedi won the state title last fall in a 3-2 victory over Orono. It was the 9th state title for Mahtomedi and the 5th for head coach Dave Wald. But switching over to Suburban East, if I can, Kayla Anderson was dominant for Alex Westad's White Bear Lake Bears, scoring 23 goals in 15 regular season games. The Bears' big wins came over Cretin-Durham Hall, Mahtomedi, and Eastridge, and the Bears ended the season ranked number 10 in Class AA, with North St. Paul also picking up their most wins since 2015.
All right, moving right along, getting into the boys soccer side of things. Geoff, what did we see from our teams out of the Fab Four last fall?
Well, White Bear Lake, unlike on the girls' end of the ledger, White Bear Lake was, if you can say it this way, dead last in the Suburban East, which was a conference that Eastridge led over Woodbury and Roseville. However, Mahtomedi in the Metro East finished middle of the table behind Hillmurray, North St. Paul, and Simley. But if we remember, Suburban East is stacked top to bottom, with North St. Paul also in the conversation of who would win the Metro East. A Hillmurray tie and a Simley loss by 1 goal were two of their bigger games, with North St. Paul losing 4 of their 6 games, or of their 6 losses by 1 goal. And that includes a section playoff loss. But if I can, let me talk about Tartan too. No wins in 2016, 4 wins in 2017, followed by a 6-win, 8-loss season in 2018. Last season, they finished 500, 6 wins, 6 losses, and 3 draws.
Getting into football now, Alex, you and I both know that it was a crazy, strange year in terms of football. Certainly nothing either of us have ever been used to. It came down to Tartan Mahtomedi as per usual, but not exactly in the way we expected. What was it like? Take us through fall of last season for the Fab 14s.
Well, as we take a look at football from last season, we saw a Tartan High School team that made history as they went 8-0, undefeated in the regular season for the first time. At the end of the season, they were ranked number 4 in the Class 5A rankings, headlined by junior star wide receiver Dorian Singer, who has received college interest from Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and more. Others include Randy Kiamonye, who has received other offers and was selected to the Minnesota Vikings All-State team that was honored before the Vikings game against Detroit in December. Mahtomedi also had a Cinderella run through the sections as they finished the regular season 2-6. However, you cannot count out a Dave Metzel coached team in November. And as they had continued to run through section play, they defeated the North Polars before upsetting Minneapolis Washburn and earning a rematch with Tartan in the section champion game and upsetting the Titans 28-27 at Tartan last November. White Bear Lake, in addition, so close to breaking through as they had big conference wins over Stillwater and Roseville, losing to top teams as well, and Mounds View by 10 points, and Woodbury by 2 points on a last-second missed field goal.
Getting into the volleyball side of things, our last sport from the fall of 2019, North St. Paul had another great year. Kind of same script, different year, but a little different. They beat Stillwater in the Section 4 3A finals for the first ever state tournament appearance, third straight section final against Stillwater, and ended up taking third place in state. Senior right side Lauren Stedman and junior libero Jenna Rebelke were on the state all-tournament team. Stedman has signed her national letter of intent to play volleyball at Lewis, and Yaisa Franco at LaSalle. Tartan finished with one of their best records in recent history. They had big wins in the season over Mounds View, Simley, and Henry Sibley. Senior outside hitter Alex Lyle led the Titans with 278 kills. She will be playing her college volleyball at NDSU in the future. To White Bear Lake, sophomore outside hitter Sammy Stephens was earned all-conference honorable mention. But in the Suburban East, when you match up against a team like Stillwater, who's constantly challenging North St. Paul for the section final, it's going to be a little tricky. And when the Stillwater team that makes it to the section final year in and year out finishes third place in the conference, you know that it's a good conference. For Matamidi, 2 seasons ago, they graduated almost their entire volleyball team when 9 seniors left, and they're still working on a little bit of a rebuild, but did have big wins in tournaments they played in throughout the season. And it was certainly a pleasure watching the North team. And as I recall broadcasting that section final, Mike Peden helped us out there. And even he seemed a bit surprised that North St. Paul came out and dominated the way that they did. So congratulations to them on a great year. Now, Alex, out of all the stuff we just talked about and stuff we don't even get to talk about for the sake of time, if there was one moment, I know it's got to be hard from all that stuff, but if there was one moment that you could pick as your favorite moment from the fall season, what would it be and why?
Well, I referenced it earlier, and I think I have to go back to the girls' Section 4A final between Matamidi and Hill Murray. Just a fantastic back-and-forth contest where you had 2 teams that were really perfectly matched. And I mentioned before that it was basically the state final and championship game where you had one team would score, and then within the next 5 minutes, another team would respond. And it was that back-and-forth play that was just so fascinating to watch. The crowd was so involved and so engaged. And it was such a fun moment to be a part of, and it's an absolute shame that it had to come down to penalty kicks.
I did not have we're going to go with a pleasant relationship with the weather and Matamidi High School last fall. We were scheduled to do a boys and girls varsity soccer doubleheader that didn't even realistically go halfway because of the weather gods on that one night in mid-September, wreaking havoc on our broadcast plans. We were scheduled to do Matamidi Hill Murray, I believe it was, boys and girls soccer, and the boys game was called with less than 10 minutes in the contest, and I believe if memory serves, Matamidi ended up winning that contest by a goal, and in spite of all the craziness, the girls' game was moved to the next day. However, we did not get to see that contest.
For me, choosing a favorite moment is particularly hard because as the sports producer, I'm at all the games, and there was a lot of crazy moments, overtimes, close games, so on and so forth. If I had to pick one, I think I have to go with the section final between Matamidi and Tartan in football, purely because when it came down to the ending, a 2-point conversion that Tartan ended up going for, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe that Tartan was opting to go for a 2-point conversion with almost no time left, and instead of kicking the extra point, and then Matamidi ends up stuffing it. They end up winning by 1 point on the failed onside kick. Like, props to Coach Discher at Tartan for having the guts to make a call like that. They made the right call. It was so close. I wish we would have had a camera angle right down the line, but we didn't, and the ref made the call, and Matamidi ends up going back to state after a crazy Cinderella run. So I think that would definitely have to be my choice, 100% for favorite moment from the fall. Stay tuned, folks. We got a lot more coming your way. Coming up after the break, we will be going into the winter season, which had probably just as much excitement as the fall season. Stay tuned. We will be right back.
Bring it. Time out, guys. I'm late to dinner. My mom's gonna kill me. Catch you guys later.
Mom wants us home. Okay. Bye, guys. You guys need a ride?
Sure. Yeah. All right. How about some one-on-one? I gotta go eat, man. Sorry. I'll see you later.
Over the course of the regular season, 11, 12, and 2. Goals against average of 223 and a save percentage of 9-2. A shot and a score right off the bat. Emma Nelson scores for the Mahtomedi Zephyrs. 7 goals a season ago, 1-0 Mahtomedi.
Welcome back, SCC sports fans. Before the break, we wrapped up talking about the 2019 fall season. So now we will get into the winter side of things for the 2019-20 year and talk about each of the sports from throughout the winter season and, of course, the Fab Four teams that go with it. Alex, why don't you kick us off with a little girls hockey action?
Well, as we start with the winter sport that begins the earliest each year, we see more of the same, unfortunately. We see North St. Paul and Tartan right in the middle of a very dense and top-heavy Metro East Conference in White Bear Lake, down near the bottom as they begin their rebuilding process following the loss of senior goaltender Callan Frank a season ago. However, they did have some success in their first season under new head coach Elsa Chori, as the Bears were led by Ellie Sarauer, who had 8 goals and 4 assists on the season. I actually played against her dad in an adult hockey league, and in fact, the last game I have to play this season is against her dad's team. Mahtomedi, meanwhile, finished as much as they have in previous years, earning 2nd overall in the Metro East Conference and a 4 seed based on their section. The Zephyrs were led by senior Emma Nelson, who had 16 goals and 18 assists for 34 points, and she will play for Hamlin out of the MIAC in the future next year, with their home games played at Trio Rink in St. Paul. Senior Lauren Ham backstopped the Zephyrs as well, with a 9.12 save percentage and a goals against slightly under 2. 7 of North St. Paul Tartan's 15 losses were by 1 goal. They ended the season on a high note, winning their last 2 games, including a 4-3 win over the Simway Spartans. Sophomore Jill Tabaka led North Tartan with 8 goals, 10 assists for 18, and Jamie Nowicki is the new head coach of the North Tartan TNT starting next season.
Covering White Bear Lake and Mahtomedi and Tartan early in the boys hockey season was an honor for me, and again, I'll get into it later in the segment, but Mahtomedi finished 2nd in the Metro East Conference to Hill Murray, with White Bear Lake finishing in the top 3 of Suburban East. Mahtomedi won their first ever state title, taking Hermantown down in overtime by a 3-2 final after Hermantown beat Mahtomedi 9-2 earlier in the year. But Mahtomedi also defeated number 1 Warroad at that point in the state semifinals too. Tartan had a bit of a roller coaster year, as Will Anderson, myself, and our great production team noted. The Titans did have a 3-game win streak that featured a 3-1 victory over Mahtomedi that we covered. White Bear Lake, much like Alex Westad himself, baffled all of us. Overall, the Bears were decent, but losing to Irondale and Eastridge were rather large hurdles to overcome. And the Bears defeated their arch rival Hill Murray 3-2 in overtime just before Christmas. North St. Paul also was in their first season of a co-op with Minnehaha Academy.
To everybody watching, in case it wasn't clear, we could have a half an hour-long feature on boys hockey between the three of us. I have absolutely no doubts of that. This is only my second year at SCC. We're still learning. I will appreciate the other sports as much as boys hockey very soon. I can promise you that. And it certainly isn't all that difficult when it comes to girls basketball. Matamidi, for example, went on a tear at the beginning of the season, winning their first 7 games in a row and 9 of their first 10. So they were fun to broadcast at the very beginning of the year when girls basketball kicked off. They also ended the season on a 4-game winning streak and won 5 of their last 6, good enough for 3rd place in the conference. White Bear Lake was the team that actually handed Matamidi their first loss of the season. And the game before that, the Bears very surprisingly upset powerhouse program Stillwater 69-55. Stillwater would go on to make it to the state tournament. So at the time, those 2 wins in a row were gigantic wins for White Bear Lake. They also beat Eastridge by 20 points towards the end of the season. So a number of big things coming out of the White Bear Lake girls team. Senior Ella Janicki led White Bear Lake with 12.2 points per game. Tartan was led by junior guard Michaela Harris, who posted 12 points per game, including a 21-point performance against South St. Paul, and it was the first season for head coach Zach Vogelsberg. Unfortunately, North St. Paul didn't have the year they were looking for. They also didn't have all their stats posted on the Basketball Hub, but from the ones they did, sophomore guard Lydia Lee led the team with 6 points per game. Freshman Lakeisha Thomas had the most points in a game for the Polars with 18 against Minneapolis Roosevelt.
Boys basketball featured Matamidi and White Bear Lake mid-table in both the Metro East and Suburban East conferences. North St. Paul won the Metro East with 1 loss on their ledger. And we saw North St. Paul play Tartan on Valentine's night, as it turned out, in the back half of a girls and boys basketball doubleheader. It was an awesome experience to work with North St. Paul head coach Damian Johnson and Mark Klingsporn. By the way, a note on Johnson, he, much like the Jeffersons, is moving on up to Benilde St. Margaret's to start the 2021 campaign.
Love the reference.
So I figured he'd appreciate that, but Damian, congratulations to you. Going into that game with North St. Paul and Tartan, Tartan had won the first 11 games of the season just before the holiday break. North St. Paul had a bit of a roller coaster year, but there was a point after the new year where they got into a winning stride. But if we go to the Zephyr side of the coin for a second, Matamidi was, we'll say, close but no cigar. They lost to Minnetonka by 16 points, which proved to be their largest loss of the season. But Brody Fox had 18.6 points per game for the Zephyrs, which led all Zephyrs in scoring. White Bear Lake defeated their rival Woodbury 70-63 in January. But as we know, the Suburban East is quite stacked top to bottom, as Eastridge showed, winning the conference with only 1 loss.
So after all is said and done talking about the winter season, I'd like to get your guys' favorite moments once again. Alex, from the winter year, I don't know why I'm bothering even asking. I think we all know what sport it's probably going to come from. But please share with us what your favorite moment from the winter season was.
Well, it's going to be it's tough to pick one. As you know, you look at the hockey season, there were a couple of cool things that happened. White Bear Lake girls over Matamidi in overtime to start the season, fantastic memory. Being able to be a part of the section playoffs again, and the boys 4AA side, fantastic. The overtime winner over Hill Murray back in December, all great things to all through. But mine actually goes back to the regular season in boys hockey. And I mentioned it earlier, with the Stillwater White Bear Lake regular season come from behind win that White Bear Lake scored 2 goals under 2 minutes to tie it, and then Grant Hofeld's overtime game winner to put them over Stillwater in that regular season game. That's my highlight from the year, simply because it was cool to be a part of, and just the jubilation that you saw out of the Vadnais Sports Center, now TCO Sports Garden. was something that I have never seen before, not even for a White Bear Hill Murray game. So it was really cool to be a part of that moment with those fans.
Geoff, what about you? You got a chance to jump in for a few, as you mentioned, basketball and hockey games. Does something stand out as being your favorite moment from the winter?
Well, just after the turn of the year, I had the chance to cover Tartan Matamidi at the Tartan Ice Arena. And that is not so much remembered for the 3-1 Tartan victory so much as if the folks will allow me to take a little bit of a shot at myself a second. I happened to, we'll say, jinx a certain Matamidi goaltender who had a 3 shutout in 9-day streak headed into that contest with Tartan. And during that game broadcast with our good friend Will Anderson, I had a chance to mention that on a an offensive zone face-off. And it just so happened that I paused a second, not sure if I should mention that shutout streak or not, and then I'm past the point of no return, so I mentioned the stat, and Dardis gets scored on.
If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty darn sure that we have a clip of the moment Geoff is talking about. Let's roll that now.
Dardis, I'm going to do it. 3 shutouts in a 9-day span earlier in the year. Started December 10th at Monticello, and there it goes.
You had to do it.
I just did it. You're welcome. Tartan on the board. I had to go there, didn't I?
And there you have it. A tremendous jinx. Apologies to Ben Dardis of Matamidi. But it ended up working out for them anyways when they would exact their revenge in playoffs and then carry on and win their first ever state title, as mentioned. Stay tuned, folks. We got to take a quick break, but coming up afterwards, we will talk about the future going forward and some potential guidelines for how the seasons could look once the fall season rolls around. Stay tuned.
Hey. Okay.
If you love me enough to tolerate my perfect little pets and all their glorious dander, then of course you'll visit nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure I'm in the right car seat.
Honey, what I think you need is a socket wrench.
I played JV basketball.
I'm sorry. I don't think it looks right.
This is good, and it's all good, baby.
Is it really all good?
If you love me enough to routinely test your handyman skills, not to mention the strength of your marriage, then of course you'll visit nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure I'm in the right car seat.
I'm gonna call my dad.
2nd and 5 from the 9-yard
Matamidi, a lot
line.
of confusion.
Singer
Throw it to
up,
Singer.
cut, touch, down, Tartan!
Welcome back, SCC sports fans. Thus far, as we've talked about the fall season and the winter season, normally, as per usual, this is where we would talk about the spring season going into the summer. Unfortunately, things have gotten wacky, so there was no spring season. But we can still look ahead to the future. So, Alex, from everything that we've talked about to looking forward, what is one team from the Fab Four that you are going to have a close eye on going into next year, assuming that games play out the way that they should?
Well, I think it's first going to be interesting to see what happens with teams next spring, if there's a season next spring too, just to see how those teams are going to adjust, not having played a full season, and if teams are on the same page, if the quality of play is as good as it was, because you look at White Bear Matamidi lacrosse, Tartan baseball, North St. Paul softball as teams to watch. But as we go back into fall and winter of next year, I'm really interested to see what North Tartan girls hockey is able to do. Because like when we talked about a couple of sections ago, we saw that there was a lot of really good things that that team was doing, a lot of close contests, losing by 1 goal a handful of times. And if it's just those few little changes that they can make, there's something really special being built out of the North Tartan program.
And how about you, Geoff? Hopefully, if things go back to normal for us broadcast-wise, as well as the team just getting to play in the fall, what teams are you looking forward to seeing? Or rather, what one team are you looking forward to seeing big things from next season?
Well, I'm not a hard man to find, as both of you guys know, and I'm looking forward to seeing actually 2 teams potentially come back to play. We'll start with the Tartan Titans, who I was able to see twice before all things broke loose. Tartan finished mid-pack in the Metro East, winning 5 of their 11 conference games, finishing with a mark of 14-11.
You're talking about the hockey team, right, Geoff?
Boys hockey team,
Just to
yes.
clarify. Yeah, gotcha.
Yep. And then I'm also looking forward to seeing the White Bear Lake Bears, if Mr. Westad will share the microphone at the TCO Sports Garden with a guy. White Bear finished 3rd in the Suburban East last season, winning 13 of their 18 games. And I'm excited to see if White Bear Lake can compete with the likes of Cretin-Durham Hall, Stillwater, Forest Lake, and Eastridge as well.
And for me, it's definitely tricky because there's so many good teams. You know, will the Matamidi girls soccer team look for a 4th straight state title? Will the White Bear Lake girls soccer team break through? They've kept having really good years. North St. Paul basketball, they'll be having a new head coach coming in, so on and so forth. But for me, the team that I have to pick, I'm sticking with Tartan, because the Tartan football team specifically, because they have a lot of pieces that are coming back. As I look here, quarterback Brandon Lockhart is coming back. Easily the biggest piece of their team, Dorian Singer, is coming back. So those are the 2 leaders right there. And they're going to be mad. No 2 ways about it. They had a phenomenal year. Best year I think they've ever had, legitimately, going 9-0 at one point, and then just barely didn't get past Matamidi for this title. So they're going to be upset. They're going to be looking to rebound. They're bringing back a lot of big pieces, and they soon could become the dominant team, replacing Matamidi, who was that team that kept winning for years and years and years, and then just snuck past on a miracle last year. So I think Tartan football will 100% be a team to watch going forward. And speaking of the future, the NFHS has released guidelines for what the fall season could look like if teams follow these guidelines to coming back to play, whether that means having fans or not, who really knows. Gentlemen, I'd love to get your opinions on said guidelines, and if you think that we will have a fall season. Hopefully you're optimistic. I think there's reason to be optimistic, but I'd love to hear what you got on the matter. Alex, I'll come to you first.
Well, when we first look at the high school guidelines as established, I think that there's a couple of things that you notice. The first is the phased approach, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, which continues to increase in size of players, athletes, and coaches working together, but then also in the amount of people that are allowed to be around. It also divides itself into areas of low risk, medium risk, high risk sports, where there are a couple of sports, football is one of them, soccer is another one of them, that fall into that high-risk category. And I think what we're going to see is we're going to need to see, as we continue to move through these phases in the state of Minnesota, you're going to have to see a lot of responsibility on behalf of the students, the student coaches, and administrators as well, to make sure that these things are followed. At the end of the day, it has to be about safety and ensuring that there are going to be ways to keep players safe.
I was going to mention with our responsibilities as a network, between the on-air talent and the graphics and the analyses that come with every broadcast, I dare say it places more of a responsibility in our hands as media assigned to cover these games. But I also want to touch real quick on the responsibilities that these players and these coaches have picked up, especially in sports like football, boys lacrosse, and wrestling, which are termed in the eyes of the NFHS as high-risk sports. What steps need to be taken to ensure these players, what's the phrase I'm even going for, continue to hold the responsibility in their hands of the safety protocols that have been developed to combat COVID and all that goes with it?
So I'd say there's reason to be positive going forward. I mean, there's lots being said as in terms of like how things could work and whatnot, and we could go into that forever. Unfortunately, running out of time, but I think there's definitely reason to be looking forward to the fall. Gentlemen, this has been a blast recapping the past year with you. There's been state championships and conference titles and lots of wins. Lots of positive things from all of the teams from the past year. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me. And we're looking forward to next year, to the 2020-21 season, assuming that they'll be able to play it. Hopefully everybody has a great summer. Thank you so much for joining us here on SCC Sports, and take care, everybody.